Did Elvis lose his way? Was the king trying too hard to remain relevant as times changed? Few stars have shined as brightly as Elvis Presley in the cultural firmament, but even the most dedicated fans admit his career had some serious missteps. Number 10. The comeback special that almost wasn't. Remember when Elvis wore that tight black leather outfit in 1968? Before that iconic moment happened, Elvis nearly missed his chance at redemption. NBC originally wanted Elvis to sing Christmas carols in a sweater on a festive set. Can you imagine? Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's controlling manager, loved the holiday special idea. It was safe, predictable, boring. Elvis had spent most of the 1960s making formulaic movies with forgettable soundtracks. His relevance was fading fast as the Beatles and other British invasion bands dominated the charts. Producer Steve Binder had other ideas. He convinced Elvis to ditch the Christmas concept and instead showcase his raw talent. The resulting Elvis special, later dubbed the '68 Comeback Special, became one of the most watched TV events of the year. Elvis looked nervous before going on stage. He hadn't performed live in front of an audience in years. What if people didn't care anymore? But this entry makes our list because it almost became another failure. Had Colonel Parker gotten his way, Elvis would have sung Silent Night instead of reminding America why they fell in love with him in the first place. The special worked precisely because it rejected the safe path Elvis had been following. It proved Elvis could still captivate an audience when he stepped outside his comfort zone. Number 9. The Las Vegas years begin. Have you ever wondered what happened to Elvis after his comeback? The immediate aftermath of the 1968 special seemed promising. Elvis recorded the brilliant From Elvis in Memphis album in early 1969, featuring In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds. These songs showed a mature artist engaging with contemporary sounds and social issues. Then came Vegas. Elvis began his residency at the International Hotel in Las Vegas in July 1969. The initial run was extraordinary. Elvis was energized, slim, and powerful on stage. But what started as a triumphant return to live performance slowly morphed into something else entirely. By the mid-1970s, the Vegas shows became parodies of themselves. The jumpsuits got more elaborate and ridiculous. The karate moves more exaggerated. The performances more rote. Elvis would perform 2 shows a night, 7 days a week, for weeks on end. The grind took its toll. Priscilla Presley later revealed that Elvis hated feeling trapped in Vegas. He felt like a prisoner, she said in interviews. He had once been a dangerous, hip-swiveling threat to the establishment. Now he was the establishment, a middle-aged entertainer performing for middle-aged tourists who wanted to see a human jukebox play the hits. The Vegas years made Elvis wealthy, but they stripped away what made him special. The raw energy of his early days was replaced by a polished Vegas sheen that felt increasingly hollow as the 1970s wore on. Number 8. The Elvis Country album. Did you know Elvis tried to reconnect with his country roots? In 1971, Elvis released Elvis Country, I'm 10,000 Years Old, an album that attempted to bring the artist back to his Tennessee origins. The concept was promising, Elvis singing the country music that influenced him growing up, creating a sonic bridge between his past and present. The album featured a clever concept where snippets of the song "I Was Born About 10,000 Years Ago" appeared between each track, creating a cohesive listening experience. Critics generally praised the effort, with Rolling Stone calling it Elvis' best album in years. So why is this on our list of failures? Because, despite its quality, it failed to recapture the public's imagination or chart the way his earlier works had. The album peaked at pound 12 on the Billboard charts, respectable but not spectacular. More importantly, it didn't lead to a sustained country direction that might have given Elvis a more authentic artistic path. Instead, Elvis quickly moved on to other projects, including more conventional pop albums and the Vegas grind. Elvis Country stands as a tantalizing glimpse of a road not taken, a more rootsy, authentic Elvis who might have aged more gracefully had he pursued this direction with more commitment. The album showed Elvis could still connect with material when it resonated with him personally. The passion in his voice on tracks like "I Really Don't Want to Know" demonstrated that the old Elvis magic was still accessible when the circumstances were right. But these moments became increasingly rare as the 1970s progressed. Number 7. The Aloha from Hawaii broadcast. When was the last time a performer attempted something as ambitious as a global satellite broadcast? In January 1973, Elvis performed a concert in Honolulu that was broadcast to an estimated 1 billion people worldwide, the first global television concert by a solo artist. On the surface, Aloha from Hawaii was a massive success. Elvis looked relatively healthy, having lost weight for the occasion. His voice was strong, and the production values were spectacular. The white American Eagle jumpsuit he wore became one of his most iconic outfits. The album of the concert topped the charts, giving Elvis his first pound 1 album since the Roustabout soundtrack in 1964. So why include this apparent triumph on a list of failures? Because beneath the spectacle lay troubling signs. The concert represented Elvis reaching for a grand gesture to prove his relevance rather than evolving artistically. The setlist was largely predictable. Hits mixed with covers like "My Way" and "What Now, My Love" that had become staples of his Vegas shows. More revealing was what happened after the broadcast. Rather than using this global platform as a launching pad for a new creative direction, Elvis fell back into old patterns. His next albums included the lackluster Raised on Rock and Good Times, both of which showed an artist increasingly disconnected from contemporary music trends. The Aloha special represented peak Elvis as global entertainment icon, but it also marked the moment where he stopped striving for artistic growth. The spectacle had become the point rather than the music itself. Elvis seemed satisfied, having proved he could still command global attention, even if he had little new to say. Number 6. The movie career that wouldn't end. Have you seen all 31 Elvis movies? Few people have, and for good reason. What began as a promising film career with gritty performances in films like King Creole, 1958, devolved into a parade of formulaic musical comedies with interchangeable plots, songs, and leading ladies. Elvis had genuine acting ambitions. Early in his career, He admired James Dean and Marlon Brando and hoped to build a serious acting career alongside his music. The early signs were promising. His performances in Loving You, 1957, Jailhouse Rock, 1957, and King Creole, 1958, showed a performer with natural screen presence and untapped dramatic potential. Then came his military service from 1958 to 1960. When Elvis returned to civilian life, Colonel Parker had rethought the Elvis movie strategy. Instead of selecting challenging roles that might enhance Elvis's acting credentials, Parker opted for safe formulaic movies that could be produced quickly and inexpensively. Films like Blue Hawaii, 1961, established a template: exotic location, forgettable songs, pretty co-star, and minimal acting challenges. The formula worked financially for a while, with movies like Blue Hawaii among Elvis's most profitable ventures. But by the mid-1960s, even these formulaic films saw declining returns as audiences tired of the repetitive plots. Elvis knew these movies were hurting his credibility. After completing Change of Habit in 1969, Elvis never made another scripted feature film. He had starred in 31 movies in just 13 years, a grueling pace that prioritized quantity over quality. The movie career represents one of the most significant what-ifs of Elvis's legacy. What if he had made fewer, better films? What if he had worked with acclaimed directors who could have nurtured his acting talent? Instead, a promising acting career became a creative dead end that damaged his musical credibility during a crucial period of popular music evolution. Number 5. The Graceland Recording Sessions. Did you know Elvis recorded an album in his living room? By 1976, Elvis had grown increasingly uncomfortable leaving Graceland. His weight had ballooned, prescription drug use escalated, and public appearances became more challenging. RCA, his record label, needed new material but recognized Elvis was unlikely to travel to a professional studio dissolution. Bring the studio to Elvis. In February 1976, RCA set up recording equipment in the Jungle Room at Graceland. Elvis's kitschily decorated den featuring green shag carpets, wooden furniture, and a waterfall. The setting was far from ideal acoustically, but it allowed Elvis to record in comfort. The sessions produced material for 2 albums, from Elvis Presley, Boulevard, Memphis, Tennessee, and parts of Moody Blue. The music reflected Elvis's subdued state. Gone were the powerful vocals of his prime, replaced by a more reflective, sometimes fragile, delivery. Songs like Hurt and For the Heart showed flashes of the old passion, but many recordings revealed a voice diminished by years of strain and lifestyle excesses. The Jungle Room sessions could have represented an intimate, Johnny Cash-style late-career reinvention. Instead, they mostly captured an artist going through the motions. Producer Felton Jarvis later overdubbed many tracks with strings and additional instruments to compensate for the sometimes lackluster performances. What makes these sessions particularly poignant is that they represent Elvis's last significant recording work. The king of rock and roll, who once recorded groundbreaking tracks at Sun Studio and RCA's state-of-the-art facilities, ended his recording career in his living room, surrounded by familiar objects rather than musical innovation. Number 4. The Elvis-Nixon meeting. When did Elvis decide he wanted to be a federal agent? In one of the more bizarre episodes of Elvis's career, he spontaneously flew to Washington, D.C. in December 1970 with the goal of meeting President Nixon and being appointed a federal agent at large for the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, predecessor to the DEA. The irony was thick. Elvis himself was developing severe prescription drug problems while positioning himself as a potential drug enforcement officer. He wrote a letter to Nixon on American Airlines stationery, stating, "I have done an in-depth study of drug abuse and communist brainwashing techniques, and I am right in the middle of the whole thing where I can and will do the most good." White House staff members, recognizing a photo opportunity, arranged the meeting. The resulting photograph of Elvis shaking hands with Nixon became the most requested image in National Archives history. Elvis presented Nixon with a World War II Colt 45 pistol, mounted in a display case, which the Secret Service confiscated until after the meeting, and received a badge in return. This episode represents a failure of self-awareness that characterized Elvis's later years. While positioning himself as anti-drug, Elvis was consuming a dangerous cocktail of prescription medications. While claiming to understand youth culture, he was increasingly disconnected from contemporary music trends. The Nixon meeting revealed an Elvis desperate for validation and official recognition, seeking legitimacy from establishment figures rather than through artistic achievement. The meeting did provide Elvis with a badge he cherished, often showing it off and occasionally using it to avoid speeding tickets. But it did nothing to address his declining cultural relevance or personal problems. If anything, it further cemented his transformation from countercultural rebel to establishment figure. Number 3, the Colonel's limitations on international touring. Why didn't Elvis ever perform outside North America? Despite his global popularity, Elvis only gave concerts in the US and Canada, with a brief stop in Hawaii. This wasn't for lack of offers or interest. Promoters worldwide clamored to bring the king to their countries, offering record-breaking sums for even a short tour. The reason? Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, refused to allow international touring. Later revelations explained why. Parker was an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands named Andreas Cornelis van Kuyjek. He had entered the United States illegally and feared he wouldn't be allowed back if he left the country. This severely limited Elvis's global reach during his lifetime. While Beatles fans in Tokyo, London, and Paris got to see their heroes perform live, Elvis fans in these cities had to settle for recordings in movies. The situation frustrated Elvis, who expressed interest in performing internationally, particularly in Japan, Australia, and Europe. By the mid-1970s, when Elvis's U.S. tours had become routine and sometimes lackluster, an international tour might have reinvigorated him. Performing for fresh audiences in new environments could have provided the stimulus Elvis needed to break out of his performance rut. Instead, he continued cycling through the same American cities, performing increasingly similar shows for the same audiences. The lack of international touring represents one of the greatest missed opportunities of Elvis's career. It limited his cultural impact, prevented him from experiencing the global adoration firsthand, and potentially accelerated his artistic stagnation in the 1970s. Had Elvis broken free from the Colonel's restrictions, his later career, and perhaps his life, might have taken a very different path. Number 2, the March 1974 Memphis recordings. How does an artist lose their way in their hometown? In 1974, Elvis returned to Memphis to record at the famous Stax Studios, home to soul legends like Otis Redding and Sam and Dave. The location seemed perfect for Elvis to reconnect with his Memphis roots and the soul music that had always influenced his sound. The sessions had promising moments. Elvis recorded country soul tracks like Promised Land and If You Talk in Your Sleep that showed he could still deliver compelling performances when the material inspired him. Producer Felton Jarvis assembled top-notch musicians, including members of the TCB Band and Muscle Shoals rhythm section veterans, but problems plagued the sessions from the start. Elvis arrived late, seemed distracted, and lacked the focus that had characterized his best recording work. His voice, while still powerful at times, showed signs of strain. More troublingly, the song selection leaned heavily on pop and country material rather than the R&B and soul music that might have better suited the setting. The resulting albums Good Times and Promised Land contained a few standout tracks, but failed to make a significant commercial or artistic impact. Critics noted that Elvis seemed to be going through the motions on many songs, with Rolling Stone writing that he sounds tired and a little bored, as if he were phoning it in. The Stax sessions represented a missed opportunity to reinvent Elvis as a mature soul artist. The studio's storied history and Memphis location should have inspired a creative renaissance. Instead, they produced largely forgettable albums that further pushed Elvis toward irrelevance in a rapidly changing music landscape dominated by rock supergroups, singer-songwriters, and emergent disco sounds. Number 1. The Final Tour. What happens when a performer can no longer perform? Elvis's final tour in June 1977 stands as perhaps the most painful failure of his career. Overweight, medicated, and clearly unwell, Elvis struggled through performances that bore little resemblance to the electrifying shows of his prime. Audience recordings and photographs from these final concerts reveal the extent of Elvis's decline. He slurred lyrics, sometimes forgot words entirely, and rambled between songs. The jumpsuits no longer fit properly. Performances of once dynamic songs like Suspicious Minds became sluggish shadows of their former glory. The tour was scheduled to continue through late 1977, but concerns about Elvis's health and capability led to cancellations. His last concert took place in Indianapolis on June 26, 1977. Less than 2 months later, on August 16, Elvis was found dead at Graceland. What makes the final tour particularly tragic is that Elvis seemed aware of his diminished capabilities, but unable to address the underlying issues. In the CBS TV special Elvis in Concert, filmed during these final shows and aired posthumously, viewers could see the struggle playing out in real time. The network added a disclaimer that the special was presented as an historical document and made no attempt to hide Elvis's condition. The final tour represented the complete collapse of the careful image management that had characterized much of Elvis's career. The gap between the vibrant young rocker who had scandalized America in the 1950s and the struggling performer of 1977 became impossible to ignore. For many fans, these final performances remain too painful to watch. Elvis's deterioration raises uncomfortable questions about the responsibilities of managers, friends, and family when a performer is clearly unwell. Colonel Parker continued, booking shows despite Elvis's obvious health problems. The tour schedule, grueling even for a healthy performer, exacerbated Elvis's reliance on prescription medications to sleep after shows and find energy to perform. Was Elvis trying too hard to recapture his glory days? Could anyone have intervened to save the king from himself? The questions lingered decades after Elvis left the building for the final time.